USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, November 21st, 2022. Each week we look back at the highlights of the weekend and the news of the week. This podcast is sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Number 1, Denver was idle. They'll probably stay number 1 in the poll this week, but number 2, Minnesota took on number 3, Michigan. This should have been terrific, but both teams, and I think even more so Michigan than Minnesota, were hit by illness. And so they didn't have full lineups and maybe not some of the players they wanted to have. Given all that, what do we learn from Minnesota's sweep in Michigan this weekend?
Well, it kind of was must-see TV a little bit Thursday night with everything that started popping up on social media and with the unfortunate illness that has happened to one of the players. And my thoughts are with the Michigan program as one of their players, from what I understand, went through a pretty serious health scare. So that was on social media. And then when their lineup chart got released and the third goalie is dressed as a left wing, made me want to turn on the TV and actually watch the game. He ended up serving a penalty and had to skate across the ice. So he's going to be in a box score as a hockey player, skater. But I think it took away from what should have been a 2 versus 3 matchup. It should have been it put a little spin on the game that you don't want to see happen. And obviously everybody, on Twitter and social media comes back to, well, they would have never played this game last year against Western Michigan. And all that was brought up into the fray. But it ended up being a pretty decent hockey game that was marred by a 5-on-3 to start the third period, but some very good individual performances. Duke had 2 goals from Michigan, and a lot of people were stepped up, and it was a very competitive hockey game on Thursday until the third period. But like you said, it was a game that should have been highly anticipated with the top players that ended up being kind of a must-watch for other reasons.
Yeah, well, let's mark January 20 and 21, 2023 on our calendar, as those will be the dates that these two teams play again. And hopefully both of them do so with full rosters, because I think that's what the fans deserve. This should be an absolute heavyweight series. And unfortunately, health and whatever the illnesses that went through both teams, as you said, more so Michigan, hopefully that's out of the way. And, thoughts, as you mentioned, with Stephen Hulse and his family, I haven't seen updates. Last I had heard was he was still in not very good conditions in the hospital. So I hope he's made some improvement and continues to do so, because it's scary. I know that the worst off is that we know that it's unfortunately not COVID, believe it or not. Imagine us sitting here saying, boy, I wish it was COVID, because, there's medicines and all that sort of stuff that you can give to combat COVID right now. Whatever he has, I don't think there was as much they could do to fight off. So very scary to see a young player who's probably in pretty good health end up in the hospital because of some sort of an illness. But the hockey that was played, I mean, you got to take your hat off to Minnesota. They did the job. And I've been very critical of this Minnesota team thus far, kept looking back at, calling them basically a 500 team for, the last month plus of the season, which they've been. But this weekend, they went in and did the job. Whether it was against a team that, was at, 75% or 50% health, that doesn't matter. You still have to win the games. And I think that's what Minnesota did.
But Minnesota did it without their backup, or without their starter. Close was out, and they had to go with their backup. A Michigan kid returns home to Yost and wins 2 games. What a story that is from their perspective. And like you said, the game still had to be played. And, the thoughts were with everybody that went through it. But Minnesota, like you said, did the job they needed to do, and they got some big road points.
Michigan posted on its social media after the game a clip of first-year head coach Brandon Naurato speaking to the media a little bit heightened emotions, talking about how they really didn't talk about much hockey all week, that they were worried about each other's health and they were just trying to deal with emotions and mental health.
Well, I think one of the worst things that a coach can have is you wake up on a Saturday morning or Sunday morning after a weekend and you have some missed calls from things that may have happened Saturday night, and or you get that call that you don't want to hear. Somebody got in a car accident or something, or there's been some issues, and those really affect you. I mean, at the end of the day, we're still talking about dealing with young men, sometimes still teenagers. And in Michigan's case, they do have a good amount of teenagers, but they're young men, and you worry about them and you feel responsible for them. And you never want those calls. You'd never want to wake up on a Sunday morning or have your phone ring in the middle of the night and have some important stuff that you missed. Those are, from a coach's perspective, those are the worst things. Those are when you wake up and your heart drops to your stomach.
Well, let's turn to another team that's seeing a lot of early success, and that's Quinnipiac. They had a 2-game sweep of their ECAC travel partner, Princeton, 4-1 scores in each game, 6-0 in the ECAC and 9-1-2 overall. And we're going to come back to strength of schedule also on that. But, you know, the Bobcats are no surprise. They have been a steady top team in college hockey for like a decade and a half now.
Yeah, I mean, Rand Pecknold does what Rand Pecknold does. He puts together winning teams. They are a perfect fit for their league. I think that they always can put together a roster that's competitive in that league. And it's not just, you know, one of those things of, oh, they're a really good ECAC team. You know, they've gotten to 2 national title games under Rand Pecknold. The last one, I believe, is 2016. But this is a team that just keeps on keeping on. And like you said, we'll talk about strength of schedule, but they're winning the games that are in front of them. And, you know, this weekend they'll have a tougher road. They're going to travel all the way to Northern Ireland for the Friendship 4. They'll end up playing Dartmouth, a pretty improved, I think, ECAC team in the opening round. Then they'll either get UMass or UMass Lowell in the consolation game or championship game. So there's, you know, some pretty tough games ahead of them. This will be a good test, but right now they have passed every test that's been put in front of them.
They just play the same way. They don't change. They do what, like you said, they do what they do. They play the same way. They have their players play those. They have a multitude of face-off plays. They are very good in the neutral zone. And those are things that they just do. And those are staples of Quinnipiac. And every team has their staple. You know, RIT has a good power play. You know, every team has something they do well. And those are the things that Quinnipiac does well. And they perfect those things. And I think they let some other things, you know, fly a little bit because they're so good at their 1-3-1, and they're so good at all their other little things. And they tend to play a little bit more offensive and loose sometimes in the offensive zone because they know they're very good going back to their net.
I also of late have been talking to coaches about why sometimes you'll see a team that you know is talented not get bodies to the net, not get there. And every coach has answered that question the same way. And they say it's hard. In the area in front of the net in the NCAA game is different than the NHL. Guys are taking dirty shots. It's a really tough place to play in front of your offensive net. Quinnipiac does it in spades. I feel like they put 3 guys in front of their net sometimes, and they are just fighting for every rebound. They get a ton of them. It just shows how skilled they can be, but also how hard they sometimes work. And I think that I respect that of Rand Pecknold's teams. I think how hard his teams work to win those 50-50 battles, those loose puck battles, has always kind of stuck in my head as what they do well.
Well, we brought up strength of schedule. Right now, Quinnipiac stands at 35th in that category. It's probably not going to improve a ton because ECAC out of conference record right now is 439. But 75% of the RPI is your opponent's record or your opponent's opponent. So if you have a weaker strength of schedule, you do have to really do much better in your percentage, your winning percentage to get up there, which I think they're going to be able to do. And I think we also have to bring it into perspective that 35th to first, it's not like one team has 10 times more difficult record. It's like 1.5 or twice in that metric. So it's not out there in a huge amount. It's significant, but not like one team has had Sisters of Mercy as their schedule or something like that. And one other thing with that too is that's a number that shifts and that gets massaged as they change the RPI formula. But if you have a weaker schedule, if you want to use that word, you've got to take care of business.
I went to Western Michigan. I have no idea what you just talked about as far as I didn't take any math courses. I didn't take anything. All I heard was strength of schedule 35th, and they're winning the games that are on their schedule, and they're doing a good job of it. Other than that, I mean, you can't ask for anything more is just to win and hope that it's enough at the end, and they hope their conference does a little bit better job in their remaining non-conference games. But way over my head in my Western Michigan education.
If there's one downfall to the current schedule for Quinnipiac was they probably thought the world of what they did out at North Dakota, getting a tie and a win out there. And now North Dakota has fallen that they're not even close to the top 20 in RPI. So there's no quality win bonus points associated with those games. Maybe they'll get there if North Dakota can get back their game and start rolling. But right now, those wins looked so great at the time, the win and the tie out there, don't really carry as much weight as you'd hope.
The Miami loss that North Dakota just had is really going to hurt them unless Miami starts getting some quality wins in the NCHC and non-conference. I mean, it is. We talk about it all the time. Losses at the beginning of the year are the same as losses at the end. And I think that one's going to really hurt them.
There were plenty of splits over the weekend. One of the premier ones was number 6 Penn State and number 17 Michigan State. I had them backwards in my pick. I knew Michigan State was going to take a game. Unfortunately, I picked the first night instead of the second night for the USCHO edge column, but a 4-3 win for Penn State, a come from behind. They were down 2 late, and then Michigan State winning at Pagula 7-3 on Saturday. I mean, the impressive thing for me out of this whole thing is Michigan State. Now they continue to play.
Yeah, they really, as you kind of just alluded to, they could have taken maybe all 6 points out of that weekend. They had the lead on Friday, and then Saturday became a wild game, a 3-0 Michigan State lead, 3 goals late in the first to tie the game. And then the final 4 goals go to Michigan State. I mean, that's sometimes when I see a Penn State game, that's what I expect for some reason. I think that you see some runs. It's like playing gin rummy, the amount of runs you end up seeing. But I thought that, this was the series that we expected. A lot of goals. You're talking 17 goals in 2 nights between these two teams. They both have really good offenses. We're going to see that continue. For 2 teams that were picked at the bottom of the Big Ten to begin the season, they put forth a very entertaining series, and they both have kind of stamped the fact that they are teams you have to keep an eye on. If you take either of these teams lightly, they will roll you over.
The thing about what they've done, and you see a split there, and you expect that from the second and third place teams in the league. You look at the standings of the Big Ten right now. It's there's a top, there's a middle, and there's a bottom. And you got Minnesota, Michigan State, and Penn State at the top. You got Ohio State right dab in the middle at 500. Then you got Notre Dame, Michigan, and Wisconsin in the bottom. And you would have never thought that this would be how it played out. You talk about teams that were picked, the coaches poll and the media poll being on paper only. Michigan State and Penn State have really risen to the top of this league. And you've got Minnesota there, you got Michigan State, and you got Penn State. Will it stay the same? I don't know. Notre Dame is close. Notre Dame could pull into that middle with Ohio State, but I mean, there's some work to be done for Michigan and Wisconsin, that's for sure, to pull up into the upper half of the league.
And that's what made this weekend that much more difficult for Michigan, was that they were already behind the 8 ball a tiny bit, and then to get swept because of, being so shorthanded, I think that hurts them even more. I think that if they can get healthy, and that might be, who knows when that is, but if they can get healthy, then this is a team that can go on a second half run. I mean, I could see this Michigan team putting up 2-3 losses in the second half and being an absolutely dominant team heading into the NCAA tournament.
Portello's got to get right, though. He hasn't looked the same as he did last year. I mean, the games that I've watched, he hasn't looked right this year yet. And maybe it's because their D aren't as outstanding as they were last year, and maybe it hid some of the woes. But I think that might be a little bit of an issue right now. Maybe it's still due to his sickness too.
One other Big Ten matchup to look at before we take a break is number 12 Ohio State and number 20 Notre Dame. It seems like Notre Dame won the kind of game it likes to win, 1-0, and Ohio State a 5-2 winner on the first night.
Yeah, I think that's a very necessary win that Notre Dame pulled out on Saturday night. I was kind of following that game online and noticed that it had stayed 1-0, and then all of a sudden I didn't realize how late it was in the game, and boom, it was over, 1-0 final score. That is exactly the game that Jeff Jackson has played well in all of his time at Notre Dame and pretty much everywhere he's gone. They know his teams know how to grab a lead and hang on for dear life. But it's, again, what you expected out of the series. You expected some sort of a split. Ohio State, I think, maybe hasn't totally lived up to expectations the whole way. I think they wanted an even better season here. Whether they were picked to do so or not, they still have those high expectations, and Steve Rollick's team seemed to match those. But I think that right now, both of these teams, as you were just kind of alluding to, Derek, they are kind of the middle of the Big Ten. One of them, of these two, I feel like will jump up into those top three, maybe even top 2 spots in the league by the season's end. But it's what the road is to get there. And every time you don't pull out 6 points out of a weekend, you make that road a little bit more difficult.
I mean, you got Ohio State at 8-5-1 overall, and they're 500 in the Big Ten. And you got Notre Dame at just a 500 team right now. Is that a top 20 team? Are we giving too much to the conference right there? That's my question is a 500 team in the Big Ten, is that a top 20 team right now?
They're more of a top 20 team to me than North Dakota. A one game below 500 team in the NCHC. So,
they won't be in the top 20 this week after a loss to Miami, will they?
I hope not. They weren't on my ballot.
That's why you guys don't let me vote anymore.
Yeah, with that, well, let's take a break and we'll come back with more looking at some splits, including in the NCHC and back out east in Hockey East when we continue. USCHO Weekend Review is sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
Sometimes it's not about wanting a new car, it's about needing one. And I needed one I could rely on. So I got an auto loan with DCU. They offer the same low rates on both new and used cars, and I was able to borrow a little extra to make a used car as good as new. My auto loan from DCU means a ride I can finally rely on, which feels like a pretty big thing. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
We're back with USCHO Weekend Review. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Let's stay out west with the splits. Number 14, Western Michigan and unranked Minnesota Duluth. UMD 5-4 on the first night. Western 5-3 on the second night. That was a win that Minnesota Duluth absolutely needed.
It was, and they should have had 2. They had the lead on Saturday, and at one point I kind of said, they kind of look comfortable. I think it was 3-1 very late in the second. They gave up a goal with 2 seconds left, I believe, in the second period. That made it 3-2. And then Western goes on to kind of dominate the third, gets 3 goals and wins it 5-3. Duluth needs every win it can get right now. So yes, the Friday win was a great one, but I think that they're sitting there savoring, kind of say we could have had 6 on the road. And how did we not close out that second game? That's probably frustration. That's a lot of the frustration that Duluth is going through this year. They're not doing what they've done well for such a long time under Scott Sandelin. And it could be personnel, whatever it is. The team, not every team can be a top team in the country every single year. But right now, they're just trying to find ways to get W's because they have dug themselves a pretty large hole at this point.
You've got three that are kind of distinguishing themselves in the NCHC, and for Minnesota Duluth to get a split, you would think that would be something that would be exciting because Western Michigan's in the top three right now. But like you said, they need to do more. And you talk about another league where the standings are a little bit upside down. You got Colorado College right in the middle, ahead of North Dakota, and Omaha that everybody thought was going to be fairly good this year, bringing up the back. I mean, I don't know. I expected more from Omaha after the last couple of years where they've been on the bubble of the tournament and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Maybe I overestimated them, but that's kind of my thoughts that they're kind of turned upside down a little bit.
Let's head back out to Hockey East. A couple of great pairings. I want to start with BU and Northeastern because we talked quite a bit about that one during our USCHO Edge podcast on Friday, Jim. Both teams won on the road. An impressive outing for Devin Levi in Northeastern's 2-0 win on Friday, making 41 saves in the shutout. BU got the overtime win at Northeastern on Saturday.
That Saturday game was a little bit wild back and forth, and to get to overtime was kind of a clinic of great goal scoring, a 3-3 game going in, and then Lane Hudson has just been fantastic for Boston University. Already an NHL draft pick, and defenseman skates right through the middle in a 3-on-3 overtime, has two places to dish the puck, and he says, nope, screw that. I'm going to make a move on this goaltender who's an Olympian from last year, and I'm going to beat him. And that's exactly what he did. Again, with overtime points and not getting full credit for a win when you go to overtime, Northeastern actually comes out ahead on the weekend. They get the 4 points as opposed to BU's 2, but BU will take those 2 points. They did not want a lost weekend at this point in the season, and it was good hockey. That was really good hockey. I got to watch much of the third period and overtime on Saturday, and that was a pretty entertaining hockey game.
Back and forth game too. You got BU comes out and takes the lead, then Northeastern gets the lead. BU ties it. Northeastern. I mean, back and forth, up and down, and like you said, there's something going on in BU. I think they're gonna, I think they've got a little bit of a challenging schedule coming up here, but they've been good, and I think they've got. You're going to see a lot this game against Notre Dame here. One game on a Tuesday night before break. This is going to be an interesting encounter because you're going to see potentially if Notre Dame stays in the top 20. I don't know, but this is a big game for both BU and for Notre Dame for down the road.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I believe this is part of a 2-game series for Notre Dame with Thanksgiving right in the middle. They're going to go to BC over there on Friday, on Black Friday. So I think that's a kind of an interesting way to spend your Thanksgiving if you're Jeff Jackson. Come back up to Hockey East territory and play two opponents that you enjoyed playing when you were in the league. And I think there's some good hockey to be played in those two games.
The other big split in Hockey East on the weekend, both home teams won. UConn, ranked number 7 last week, and number 13 UMass Lowell. The Riverhawks winning 3-2 in overtime on the first night. UConn 4-2 winners in Connecticut the next night.
Again, it's like one of these series where one game goes to overtime, the other doesn't. So UConn comes out on top of that series, 4 points to 2 over Lowell. But the drama of Friday's win, Lowell never trailed, and then their captain Kyle Berglund gets the overtime game winner after their goaltender had stopped made an incredible save on a breakaway just seconds before. I think that's one of the things I enjoy most about 3-on-3 overtimes. You see a lot of that great plays at one end of the ice, and it goes quick up the other end, and the game-winning goal comes. So both of these teams are playing well. I don't know how to sum it up any better. I think that they'll both kind of try to separate themselves in the second half. One team probably will, one team might not, or both of these teams could end up at the top of Hockey East. There's a lot of hockey to be played, especially for Lowell. They have some games in hand. UConn, they played a lot of their league schedule already. They've played, I think almost half of their league games have already been played. So there's a lot of hockey left, but it's interesting, the fact that UConn really has sowed that seed. They've dropped a lot of wins. They've taken a lot of points early, points you can't take away from them. So a lot of teams are trying to play catch up. They have the games in hand, but you still have to go out and find a way to win those games.
Yeah, and when you play a lot of league games early, you want to set the tone. You don't want to be just kind of in the middle, because you want to put up a number, just like a golf tournament. You want to put up a number, and you want people to have to catch you. And they're in the clubhouse with a little bit of a lead. You're going to see them take the weekend off. They're going to play a kind of an interesting one game against Cornell. And then Tuesday night, I know we're getting ahead to the next week. Who would ever thought a Tuesday game, UConn and Merrimack, would have so much implications in Hockey East? And good for both those teams for taking that step. But like I said, Tuesday night, UConn, Merrimack, you would have never thought that would be kind of a who's hot in the Hockey East right now.
Yeah, that was not on my must-watch TV schedule when the season started.
You didn't highlight that one and say, I got to be at...
Not have that one on the schedule.
Well, you've at it now.
Isn't it good for the game, though, to see some of these standings turned upside down?
Oh, it is. There's no doubt. I mean, you need this. As the world was convinced that Twitter was going to come to an end this weekend, I decided to make my one last tweet, as everybody was doing. I said, if this is my last tweet ever, I want to go on the record as saying, I believe this year will have a first time. NCAA Division I men's hockey will have a first time national champion crowned. And I firmly do believe that. When you look at, I go by betting odds sometimes, and when you look at the teams, the top 10 teams in the betting odds right now in Vegas, I think 4 of the 10 of them have never won a national champion. You've got St. Cloud. I'm going to do this trial off the top of my head. St. Cloud, Penn State, Notre Dame, and maybe UConn might all be in the top 10 in betting odds right now. None of them have ever won a national championship. So you never know what you're going to see.
I was really worried about Twitter. How am I going to get my news? How am I going to get my rumors? And then I was going to have to learn how to do Instagram and TikTok. And
don't do TikTok. Don't do TikTok. Stay with Instagram.
Those are both way over my head right now. But we're still here on Twitter. Thank God.
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry. I was talking to some folks on Saturday on the RIT campus, and they were convinced that the undergrads of Computer Science House could keep that whole thing running and still do all their classes on top of it.
I thought you were going to say you were talking to Elon Musk on Saturday and things were going to be okay.
Well, we've talked about the West, we talked about the East, and we have to make sure we talk about the Central Collegiate Hockey Association so that we don't get phone calls asking why we haven't. Michigan Tech had a good sweep over the weekend. They're 8-3-2 right now. They swept St. Thomas.
Yeah, can we put them in the same category as a Minnesota State yet? I mean, their record is the same. I don't know that their schedule has been as tough as Minnesota State, but I mean, they're winning games. They're up there. They're kind of doing what you expect Michigan Tech to do, maybe even a little more. So they've opened my eyes a little bit. I have them more on my radar screen this week as I look at their record of 8-3-2 than I maybe did a couple of weeks ago.
But if you look at the standings, and you look at winning percentage and their points percentage, Bowling Green's in first right now at 5.67. Minnesota State's at second at 8.33. And then you got Tech at 5.83, Northern at 5.42, Bemidji at 5.56. So you've got 4 teams basically at 500. And then you got Minnesota State, who's 5.1, 0-0-1-1. I mean, all these standings. They've
played. Yes, they've played a lot less games, and that's the weird thing about when you look at the CCHA. They have a real big discrepancy in the number of games played by some of the teams. You're looking at, Lake Superior's played 4 games at this point. That's so. And Minnesota State,
you can't say they're Minnesota State territory yet. They've opened their eyes a little bit, but they're still in that next grouping. That next grouping.
But their overall record, they've done well out of conference, I guess.
In a conference that hasn't done well, right? So good point.
Right. So they've helped carry them a little bit. No, but have not played as tough of a non-conference schedule as Minnesota State.
We're bickering. We're kind of going back and forth with each other this week. I kind of like I thought we were supposed to give thanks this week. Now
this is the week that we're starting to air our grievances. We're not on the air during Festivus. So
there you go. I'm grateful for the bickering because it's good for listenership. Well, before we get to our homework assignments, something popped up yesterday on Twitter. The suggestion is out there that San Diego State University is looking at bringing Division I hockey. They're looking at a feasibility study. They've had a club team there since 1972, and it would be a return of college hockey to San Diego, which Derek reminded us of as we were getting ready to record.
Yeah, U.S. International, the Gulls. Brad Butow, the last coach there, who was at Minnesota, Colorado College. I played for him in minor pro hockey. Ended in, after what we say, 8 years. They went to an NCAA tournament. I think it's a little far-fetched right now. I think this is, we're throwing out other places. And I used to be on the College Hockey Inc. board to where I'd have an idea if this is real or not. I think this might just be a little bit of a smokescreen. But you look at what went on in Vegas this weekend, or was it where the Anchorage played UNLV and they played Liberty. Maybe this is just sort of another way to move a little bit west. I'd welcome it. That's for sure.
There's no doubt. I think it's good. As I look at these feasibility studies and some of these places that are doing them, I just feel like they're geographically on islands in college hockey. And Arizona State was geographically on an island, but Arizona State has more money than almost any school in the country, besides a Power 5 Big Ten type of, it's what no hockey school has ever seen in terms of money. Maybe some of the Michigans and Minnesotas and Wisconsins, but I just think that you really have to have a lot of resources to make hockey work in a geographically isolated place. And that's what I look at San Diego State as. I look at any school that is trying to move. I mean, we saw it with Huntsville. Huntsville's there's nothing wrong with Alabama Huntsville in terms of a hockey school. They had some great success at the Division II level. They've been to NCAA tournaments at the Division I level. They've been competitive at times, but it's difficult to get to you. And San Diego was not an easy place to reach. There's a couple of nonstop flights from major cities there every day, but that's what makes Arizona State more feasible, is the fact that you can get to Phoenix, Arizona, which is literally right next to their campus. The airport is down the street. You can get there nonstop from almost every city in the United States, every major city in the United States. You can't say that for San Diego. You can't say that for too many of these destinations. So I'd love to see a few more of these feasibility studies to happen in better geographic territory. We're not seeing them out in the Northeast or even on the East Coast. If you even go down to like Maryland or North South Carolina, you're not seeing it there. You're not seeing it enough. We saw some out in the Midwest, and those have yielded us some new programs. But I wish we would see more of these in markets or from schools large enough that I believe that it's a reality, or that it's a reality that could be successful.
We're forgetting about Binghamton that did one. They came out and said that got quiet. Utica wanted to go Division I. That got quiet. All the new schools out in the Newhall that got a little, that's kind of died down a little bit. Illinois, that was close to happening. I mean, there's been so many that have been very close, and I think you're going to see some of these pop. I think some of these are really gonna happen. But do I think San Diego is one that's going to happen? That's the amount of guarantees they would have to pay. I mean, it is outrageous to get home games, and you can't. Lindenwood's doing it this year. They got 4 home games. I imagine they're getting a lot of money out to go on the road. But eventually, you've got to play on your own campus to get enthusiasm. So Lindenwood will have to start getting some of these games back, hopefully for them. And but I think you're going to see some of these pop. I think but I think you're going to see them in the pocket of areas that they could join a league or they could play easily non-conference games.
Somebody's got to be first in a region. And unless you can get a whole league, like if all the Pac-12, if 6 Pac-12 teams or schools said, yeah, we're going to form a team and you kind of start a league, that's the only way you're going to do a new region and have other people in the region. I also think with more independence right now, there's maybe an opportunity for teams to be able to pull together a schedule, and maybe out of all those independents, you get a scheduling alliance and maybe even a conference for a while things develop. So there's a possibility, but I think the big one's got to be travel.
But you just said it in the travel though. All those independents are all over the place.
All over.
Yes, you got
LIU
LIU.
Are they playing a month on the West Coast while they go to both Alaskas and San Diego State? I mean, maybe pop in Arizona State. Now you've got to,
and then you got Lindenwood on the way back.
There you go. And you take all online classes and everything's just great. And maybe they give you a month refund on your dorm room. I don't know. Anyway, that's one that's out there. Chalk it up to another rumor, but we'll keep an eye on that one. Last item, we had some homework assignments as we were talking last week about the emphasis on protocol violations. And so we're supposed to talk to some coaches and some officials and some broadcasters. And I'll tell you what, nobody likes it and nobody wants to go on the record.
I talked to a couple coaches and they're not fans. They think they've never had, it's not like college hockey's had a problem with brawls. One team got a penalty for a guy going over and tapping his goalie at the end of a period and gave it, hey, good job. You talked about what happened at Sacred Heart and RIT. Michigan got a protocol penalty, which I think was deserved because they came out with 23 or 24 seconds left on the clock and they were late. But college hockey is taking very insequential things, all these little things that have never been a big problem, and now they're playing a major impact in the game. If you go a weekend, we're not going a weekend in either league without seeing a protocol penalty, and it's affecting the game, and coaches don't like it. And because they never saw that there was a problem with it. I mean, it's not like we're having brawls every week that you say, hey, you got to go to your side, or people staying on the ice causing the extra 30 seconds. Everybody always would come out at 7. They would always be ready to play hockey if they stayed out for an extra 12 seconds on the clock. I think yes, they put the rule in, they got to enforce it, but there was no need for the rule. There was no problem.
The conversations I had, the biggest takeaway I had was that there were enough vocal people influencing the rules committee that wanted this rule in place for whatever reason. The biggest thing that was pointed to me was games were getting too long and everything was a reason to make them longer, and everything that was done between both this and trying to shorten the number of video reviews that we have. And I will go on the record of saying, I think at least in the games I've worked, I've seen less video review. Let's just take that aside. But every coach I talked to this week who I asked about the protocol penalties, they all said, listen, people have told us, and they've told us again, and they have told us again, we are going to get protocol penalties if we violate X, Y, and Z. So when we get them, nobody is surprised and nobody believes that they shouldn't be called because they know that they're there. I mean, I watched, Greg Carville got one last week when his team was playing BU. This is about 2 Fridays ago, where he himself didn't get to the bench in time. They were walking across the ice as they were getting there. I personally kept an eye this past Friday night. His team was down 2-0 against New Hampshire. Again, another long, probably locker room speech with a lot of yelling and screaming. His coaching staff didn't get started toward the bench until there was probably about I don't know, maybe let's say 1:20 left, and they have a long walk at UNH. And I don't see Carville coming out. I said, what is he doing? Is he finding a way around? No, he ran across the ice. He did not go along the boards. He ran right across the ice, that fresh ice. I mean, I guess you're skilled because you're a skater. You don't slip, but he made it all the way to the bench, and he got there with about 25 seconds to go. No problems this week. He was not getting another protocol penalty.
But you talk about it. They're being told. Do they agree with it? The coaches I talk to think it's absurd.
I don't think anybody agrees with it, but they are fine when it's called because they know that they screwed up. It's any penalty. Like, not everybody agrees with the way you call hooking. When you get a stick into somebody's gloves and you don't really affect the play, but you still get called for hooking. Nobody likes that, but they know when your stick gets parallel to the ice and you touch a guy in the hands, it's usually going to get called. Nobody likes this penalty, but at least they all understand when it's called. One coach said to me, I'd rather get protocol penalties called on me consistently than have a 5-minute major called one night and not have it called the next night when it's an exact same hit. So I'll leave it at that.
That's in the game, though. These are, and I think this is where you're going, Ed. This doesn't have to do with the game. And it's not like this is going to speed up the game because you go tap your goalie. I mean, I had a coach tell me that he's got 2 face-off violation calls this year. So now he just said, you get the first one, you might as well just throw them the puck because we're not going to get another one.
Lose the face-off.
Yeah, so we're not even going to really go into the face-off because we don't want another penalty. I mean, that's a part of the game. The hooking is part of the game. The protocol, and once again, it hasn't happened to me. I've just got an opinion, and I've talked to enough people. I mean, I was told by one coach, if you really want to speed up the game, let's go to the 12-minute intermissions like the Big Ten. That's the way to do it, not with protocol penalties.
I don't disagree with you. I just knew where coaches were coming from when they said, we get it. We understand that if the rule's in there, we're going to get called for it. Don't screw it up. And we've tried to emphasize it with our players. And I again sat in a broadcast booth this weekend watching warm-ups and watching those guys getting literally kicked off the ice by captains saying, get in the locker room, go, go, go. And nobody was on the ice. So I don't know why it's there that much. I don't feel like it has a good impact on the game. It may not last past this year. It might be one of those things that in a non-rule change year, which we have this summer coming up, you can you'll hear the decree come down to stop emphasizing it. But until that decree comes, referees are doing their job by emphasizing the protocol.
And that's the area where I do have a problem. And admittedly, I only see mostly one league, but I have not seen protocol called evenly. I've seen teams get away with staying on the ice too long. And for years, and I won't name names, I've seen teams violate protocol with the on-ice introductions. And I know there are other schools around the country that do that, and never is that called. Back to the face-offs and the warnings. Here's an observation I've had the last couple of years with the warnings. Linesman is there and holding the puck, and the centers are there ready to take the face-off, and somebody flitches, and then there's a warning. And then after the warning, the linesman just drops the puck and doesn't play around at all. Am I just seeing things, or is that what's happening?
I actually had a linesman who worked very high into the postseason last year, have this discussion with me during the postseason last year. And he said that the linesmen themselves hate the warning rule. They liked it better when you could kick a player out of the circle and put it into center. It took longer, absolutely. But he said that you felt as a linesman a lot of pressure on that second faceoff to not call any violation, to let them get away with more because you didn't want to have to put them in the box for 2 minutes. Now, I've seen twice this year, linesmen call it where they give the first warning, the second warning, the guy does the same thing, they call the penalty. I think that's the only way you make that emphasis of the rule work, because if you are letting them get away the second time, it's useless. Why just drop the puck the first time and let it be a free for all? I know why all rules are put into place, and we've seen so many times I think the rules committee does a good job, but sometimes they just try to do too much. And that might be where we are with the protocol. That might be where we are sometimes with these face-off violations. You've got, the playing rules of hockey have been around for a long time and they're pretty simple. But when you try to make them too complex, I think that it makes the job for the officials a lot more difficult, and you're just putting them in a position where they're going to get screamed at, they're going to get yelled at more, and they're going to hate their job more. And you're impacting the game, as you've kind of said so many times here, Derek.
I'm done. I'm off my soapbox. I gave the homework assignment. And I'm getting fired up about it again. I'm done. I'm not even coaching this year. I hope you're right. I hope they rescind it, because next year I don't want to have to. I'm going to come on your show. I'm going to be a guest and talk about the protocol violations. Now, that's what next year.
I hope, because this is a holiday week, just like my daughter's school, there's no homework this weekend.
No homework. But you can get started on reading for your midterm. USCHO Weekend Review is sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org. Find our podcasts at uscho.com/podcasts, or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.